talk about money, or social media and money, or rather budgeting. The sinking moment when the rubber really hits the road and you walk into the CMO, CFO office or the client's office and you really have to sell the social media plan that you have put together. So the question is, what's the narrative that helps that? What are the metrics that will help you do that? And more importantly, what is that we could do in this room and beyond to make that entire process easier? So please help me welcome a panel of esteemed practitioners to hear their point of view about how research and analytics can help them to allocate or reallocate euros, yuans, or dollars for social media. All right, so welcome, and as a quick round of introduction, if you can tell me what you do and how it pertains to social media, and equally importantly, what are the use cases in your organization for social media? I'd like to start with Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks so much for being here. Wow, this room really filled up. I'm Sarah Hofstetter. I'm the president of 360i. We're a digital agency. I guess my relevance to social media is that we speak with more than 200 million people every day on behalf of our clients.
Wonderful. Andy.
I'm Andy Markowitz. I am Director of Global Digital Strategy for GE. Social means a lot of things to us depending on who you're talking to at what time. For corporate, we use social in a very kind of storytelling, dynamic way. And then for our businesses, we use it in a much more practical way to kind of connect with our customers. So kind of a multitude of different approaches.
Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Campbell. I'm the General Manager of Integrated Marketing Communications at the Colgate-Palmolive Company. I focus on the US, and I essentially have all marketing communications directed at the consumer, so everything from traditional all the way through to social, PR, and you name it. So. And
Matt.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Pettigene. I'm Vice President of Marketing for ADP. You may not have heard of ADP, but you may have seen us. We are behind many people's payroll, probably in this room. We pay 24 million Americans in the US, 1 out of every 6. When we pay people, we move a lot of money. We move about $1.3 trillion to the US financial system every single year. So the B2B fit for social media might be kind of interesting for folks in the room, especially this audience. We use it for a lot of things, but the thing I'll talk about today is distribution of thought leadership. We have an entire research institute where we distribute thought leadership through social channels as well as through other paid-on and earn methods. As well, you may have heard of our National Employment Report, where every month we forecast employment trends in the US 2 days before the government can do it. And we use social media for that a lot.
Thank you so much. So starting with Sarah, you're obviously immortalized with the Oreo tweet during Super Bowl. And the work that you do your clients is great. But my question is, how do you use social media for your own purposes? What's the use case there?
Sure, immortalized at this age is going to be problematic. But I think as an agency, we use social media for a whole bunch of things. The first, and it's great to be in this audience, is for listening. So making sure that we have our finger on the pulse of the business so that we can develop, very similar to what Matt says, thought leadership, because we are actually, as an agency, in the B2B business. So listening is definitely number one. Great tool for us for recruitment purposes. And as an agency, we are all about our people. So A, it's about getting in great talent, and B, it's about promoting the great talent that we have. So we use social media as an agency to distribute, curate, lots of thought leadership for the agency.
Thank you. Andy, social media is many steps closer now to being a mainstream tool compared to just a few years ago. So you all make regular investment decisions. How smooth is this process? How does it compare to some of the other decision processes in the organization, and what could measurement?
I think it varies. I think there's a maturity curve with this, and I think part of it is the need and desire to want to use terms that I think hinder us around things like it's social and it's mobile and whatnot. And when all media is really social and everything really is a mobile touch point. So for us, when we think about social, it's fairly easy for us at the corporate level because we're incredibly enabled by our CMO and by our group leader to get out and experiment. So we have, I think our group has tremendous courage to go out and really not ask the questions of what's the exact ROI, but use this as a storytelling mechanism to make GE more accessible. So for us, if you want to make GE more personal, if you want to make it more of a place where you can see the people behind the story, that type of work is, that type of story is easy to tell, and it is, social is obviously the place where you would tell those stories. For the businesses, it's really about, how do I get to a mechanism that helps me solve a business need. And in that particular case, that could be around social selling and using the LinkedIn social graph. It could be around customer communities, but very rarely does it ever have to do with Facebook or Twitter, because they're not necessarily, in our case anyway, B2B mechanisms. So we look at social as a term, as a way to solve a business problem for our businesses and as a communication platform for corporate. But mostly, we're not engaged in huge media mix analysis on our spending. Solve a business problem, tell the story. It's bifurcated that way.
So picking up on that, how about you and the B2C business? How does that conversation go with the CFO?
So different, because return on investment is very much fundamental to everything we do. It's not always easy to get to the true ROI of every touch point. Obviously, marketing mix is, I think, like everyone else, catching up and dealing with some complexities that are not completely sorted yet. But I think the biggest thing in our business is everyone wants to do social. All our marketing across the groups is interested. They want to do it beyond, testing and learning and kind of experimenting, really deploying great resource against it. And we're often in my group, interestingly, which kind of owns digital, is asking people to really get the strategy right first, figure out what it is you're trying to achieve with social, and let's choose the right tools. And social may or may not be the answer to your communications challenge, by the way, and really to make sure that we have a strategy in place first, and then figure out what we can measure and if it's achieving that result.
How about you?
Yeah, so I think the panelists have given really good answers. I think I want to step back just a little bit and talk about the approach to social media, which I think we'll get into how we talk about this at the C-suite. So I think when people talk about social media, they jump right to the easy part, and it's the easy part that I call the offense. When you think about distributing posts, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or Google+, whatever it is, I want to put information out. It's very company out to consumer. That's the offense. That's really, quite frankly, the easy part. Anyone can spin up a page and anyone can put up a post. And I think the hard part is more the defense. So what happens when you open that channel as a company, as a viable channel for communications, and you start saying something and people start saying something back? And how are you going to respond to that? Especially when you don't like what they're saying. Or maybe you have a response to it. How do you respond? Who responds? What are the playbooks? What do you follow? So all of a sudden, this starts to snowball and get big. And chances are that conversation's already ongoing online. And so what we did was we found examples of where conversations were going online about things that weren't necessarily positive about the brand, things that we had very good responses for, but A, no one was listening, and B, no one was responding. So you take that, you show that to executives, and you say, this is what's going on online. Do you want to engage with this? These are our customers talking to us, and give real examples. And that got kind of the wheels turning. Then you can turn your attention more to the offense piece, which I think we've heard a couple of really good examples here around what's your business problem and how are we going to solve it. Social media may or may not be, to Scott's point, part of that mix. I think trying to push it in every single time and say, we're going to show the ROI of social media and kind of forcing it through, that's not a recipe for success. Really being strategic about what is the objective, how are we going to achieve it, and what role specifically is social media going to play in it. It may not be it's going to close the deal. It may not be that dollar. It may not put something into a cart. But it could have engagement. It could have clicks. It could have impressions or different things that you can measure for different parts of the funnel and different business objectives. So I think taking the offense and defense approach is a good place to start.
I think that there's a there's an interesting part to that, which is kind of ties what Scott said and what Matt said, which is there's the idea of being social at the core, and Scott was talking about like areas that he owns, and then there's talking about social at the edge, which could be your offense or your defense. And I think one of the biggest challenges ends up being the whole idea of being social by design. So you've got executive management saying, yes, we need to be social, and then giving this mandate. And the fact that all of you guys were talking at lunch about the importance of social was so critical. But the question really becomes, how do you weave that into the way you plan? And it's not just planning marketing, it's planning all of your proactive, reactive communications. How do you make sure that as a business, everything that you're doing is considering the role of two-way engagement or multi-way engagement, which is really more likely, like Matt said. Those conversations are going on, whether or not you're a part of them, and where you play that role is really critical. But if you're looking at social as, putting baby in a corner, you're never going to be successful at that, no matter how many other best practices you have. The number one thing, which is the hardest thing to do, is to figure out how to make your organization social by design. And all of the companies, I guess except mine here on the stage, are companies that have been around for a really long time. So you guys have the much harder job, which is figuring out organizationally and dynamically, how do you figure out the role of social as it relates to comms planning, PR, listening, measurement, and a whole host of other things.
So picking up on that, so where does social belong to in the organization? Do we have the final answer for that?
Gosh, I mean, I'll start because I don't have to worry about that. Because the answer is it really depends on the way the organization is set up. And agencies more often than not ends up organizing around the way large companies organize. And so that makes it really interesting because there is no final answer, at least not in my opinion. And so when you think through it, a lot of it is about where are, we actually classify our clients in two ways, leapers and steppers. Our clients don't know which ones they are. But you've got your steppers, which are the people that are just kind of going by whatever playbook worked before, and they are just working to get their rotation, advancement, whatever, and the risk-taking is not quite there. And then there are leapers, which are people who are looking at opportunities and saying, hey, where is their industry going? Where is their competitive set going? Or where is their new competitive set going? And they're willing to take risks because that will give them the kind of advancement that's necessary to move the business in this economy. If you put social media under steppers, you're never going to become social by design. You're going to end up in a very siloed, programmatic kind of environment. The goal is to figure out where the leapers are. If the leaper's sitting at the CMO level, great. If the leaper's sitting in the CFO level, great. Haven't seen that yet, but who knows?
So I
think
hear
it belongs
to that. So I hear that unless the organization is social by design, it's destined to function less than perfectly. What do you guys think? Well, how do you see in your end? Yeah.
But I think to piggyback on what Sarah said, I don't think when you ask that question, it makes it seem like it belongs in one place and only one place. And I think to piggyback on functional by design, it belongs throughout the organization, right? It touches sales, it touches recruiting, it touches IT, it touches internal communications, it touches marketing, right? All throughout, and we want those people embedded in the business that understand those functions very, very well. I think what's critical though is a centralized governance, where you all come back together and agree on standards for the entire company. So you have leaders in each of those groups that then they themselves come together and meet around a central governance structure. That I think is what's important too. That way it doesn't belong in one person or one group. Is it in marketing? Is it in sales? It's that central governance and then embedded throughout the business units.
So the governance issue is born out of this heightened sense of, oh shit, what did someone say about my brand? Am I going to get in trouble, especially for those of us in regulated businesses? And that's the nature of what it is. Some businesses are born on third base, right? They're born this way, this is the way they operate. Others get there kind of through a near-death experience, right? Their business goes to the crapper, so to speak. Someone else is eating their lunch. What do they have to do to kind of turn it around? And then there's a third piece, which I guess would be some leapers, which would be people who really lead with courage and whatnot. Our premise at GE is business has gone social, right? It's not about social media. It's about social media marketing. It's not about, how can we get something viral, but how do we have the most impact and influence on the market that we want, whether it's influencers or whether it's customers. So I think the premise of some of this is about social media versus social as a way to do business. And I think we have taken a little bit of a longer look at that and have kind of been able to kind of structure what we do with governance to a certain degree of how to organize social maturity throughout the organization. So we have a very stepped process along 7 key pillars on how to, kind of have a maturity range across digital and social.
And in a business with the long sales cycles and sort of very involved customers, I think it's very easy to see why it makes sense. But in another category where...
Very different. So, when we get into social, anyone gets into social, particularly if it's at a company level, there's a deployment of resource that's managed from the top. When it's small brands in a house of many brands, the question is, how do you provide for that governance and that kind of infrastructure and support? So, and it's, once you're in, you can't stop the conversation, right? So we're trying to approach social by building infrastructure around our biggest brands, where we know where we want the conversation to go and where the conversation is. And we're trying to build out our expertise and experience and then expand as we can handle it, quite honestly. As I said, everybody in every brand wants to be social today, but most of our marketers are in their position for a year and then they're on to something else tomorrow.
So I know you know this, and I know you know this. So before I get to talk out of both sides of my mouth. So I'm at GE now, which is a B2B company, and before that I was at a CPG company, and I firmly believe, and I get to say this because I don't work there anymore, I think that a lot of the CPG companies are held hostage by a lack of definition on how to frame what the value of that is, right? I mean, when the budgets are allocated and the media mix says this is where you end up. So we're having the kind of, the discussion that kind of feels like we should take the next step and not have this discussion. You got to find a different way to kind of exercise the demons beyond that, because at the underpinnings of that statement is we don't know how to figure out the actual value of this or that or whatever the other finger is.
So how can we in this room help? What should or could research do to help to become a looper?
I like that chicken move. We'll get there. There are a couple of things that we can start doing, which is, first of all, making sure that we're considering the role of social not in its own silo, but against objectives. So the first part is clarifying objectives. So if everybody on Scott's team is saying, give me one of those, which is affectionately known at most of my clients as Gemüt, then the question is why? What are you trying to do? And I think one of the biggest things that we can do as marketers, and particularly with all of you in the audience, is start mapping out what are we trying to do and why, and what role is social playing, not necessarily exclusively A or B, but how does it move along the line. So I work on a lot of packaged goods brand, more impulse purchases. Are we here to raise awareness? Are we here to drive consideration? Are we here to have them pick our brand more frequently? Or are we here to just convert? And many other, obviously, options along the way. I work on Oreo. Oreo does not have an awareness problem, guys, right? So don't sit there. It's not important for me to be telling you that we got 575 million impressions on XYZ post. It doesn't matter towards moving your business. But if I'm working on another brand where the brand might not be as well known, well then yeah, that's important. Or if you're trying to move share in a category, then let's make sure that we're creating the right alignment. But instead, everybody's saying, give me 1 million fans, or if you have 1 million fans, give me 10 million fans. And it's so much less about that and so much more about alignment to the right KPIs. We will not put a piece of content in market for a client without having set those KPIs in advance, because ultimately, every CMO is going to ask, so, did it work? How am I doing? And if you can't answer that, how you're going to answer that up front, then you can post-rationalize anything. There's no shortage of data, right, guys? It's just, let's be honest with ourselves so that we're aligning the results towards the objectives.
I'd love to see the research community help us get to what are the right questions to ask. So our marketers will come up with questions or ways or KPIs, but quite honestly, there's such a richness in social media about understanding where the opportunities are and how to think your way through those kinds of things strategically and say, based on what we've been listening to and what we've been learning, here are the kind of things we want to do, and here are the things how we would like to measure that. And I think it could be a much more proactive role, frankly, at least in my own experience at Colgate is I think that our researchers could be more, getting in front of it, helping us understand what we need to be trying to achieve and designing ways for it to get at it through social media information rather than just reacting to us yelling, please can you measure this? We need to show that we're being successful at this.
So I think the challenge with research is going to be is it tends to be very rear view mirror, and I'm not accusing anyone of rear view mirror research, but if it takes a little while to do, right, to poll, to sample, to interpret, maybe there's a way of something that's a lot quicker, a lot more pulse. If we do something that looks back a year from now, it's really not going to be relevant. A lot of things will happen between now and then. I've made an analogy, I've never done it publicly, it's interesting to see how I do this for the first time, of social media like a magazine business. I think the magazine business is really interesting for some reason. So what's your job if you say, I'm going to start a magazine, what am I going to do? Well, I've got to get subscribers. Well, how do I get subscribers? Think followers. I got to have really good content. Well, how do I get really good content? I get really good writers. How do I get really good writers? I pay them a lot of money. How do I pay them a lot of money? I sell advertising. And the advertising, we can say, you have a really targeted audience. I'm a runner, I read running magazines. I'm going to sell you advertising to readers who run, right? We have a very, very target demographic. I think social media is very much the same way. Whereas if I can build a follower fan base, for me, LinkedIn is huge. LinkedIn is the large B2B social network site. So we will take a quality following in LinkedIn similar to a quality magazine subscription base. Because now I can take the information that I have, my content, and push it out to my followers, and I'm the only advertiser. I get to brand the whole thing myself. It's completely owned. And the beauty of something like LinkedIn is it can be segmented, right? So now I have data that can be segmented and information and content that can be segmented, and I have a channel that I can distribute it on that is segmented. Again, very much like a magazine business. It's not just running magazines, it's a women's running magazine and a men's running magazine. So we'll take our employment report data, which is segmented by company size, geographic region, and industry. And I can target an update to a small, mid-sized construction company in the Midwest and say, here's how employment changed in your region, in your industry, and your company size. That becomes very relevant. If we can show how that is even more impactful than just Facebook, someone said we don't put it out on Facebook, what's the click-through rate or the engagement rate in LinkedIn targeted versus something like a Facebook post? That would start to get to be really interesting, but that's short and quick and fast.
So how many people here have been defriended on Facebook? Admit it, come on. How many people have defriended someone on Facebook? You're all, most of you are liars. So we talk about the digital customer journey, or for you, it could be the digital consumer journey, and social and its sphere of influence, right? So a million Facebook likes or 10 million Facebook likes, which one is better? At some point, there's diminishing returns with this, right? The virality of Smirnoff vodka. Right? And what did it prove out? What didn't it prove out? Well, it was a hilarious video. And the virality of Oreo and the tremendous stuff that you do. The value of the people that we engage with, we have found over time, will diminish if they are not organically coming to us. If you buy them, or if you get them in a fringe way, they become less important to you. So this underlying premise of influence within social, I think, is a key one to consider. So for this group, I would say that it's not about the like, it's not about the impression, it's the underlying piece, which is you influence more, you drive a newsletter sign up, you buy something. This group needs to find some way to measure the impact below the line, so to speak, than at the surface level. And I think that's where there's going to be a critical mass of, once you understand that a click can lead to this in this type of context, I think you're going to open up a lot of things.
There was an interesting campaign, I think it was interesting, which is ironic because I'm kosher, but there was a campaign that we did for Oscar Mayer to help them with their bacon. Now you see why it's not really so relevant. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we were given a tiny amount of money to help promote a new line of bacon for Oscar Mayer. And our first instinct was to do a competitive and say, okay, well, how's Oscar Mayer performing against all these other bacon brands? And we said, screw this, let's look at this in the context of the category. Well, duh, bacon is big on the internet. And one of the things that was the most important thing for us was that of all of the conversations about bacon, only 2% were affiliated with a brand. And so that includes, Wendy's and, Denny's and all the other brands that are trying to get in on bacon, as well as all the other bacon-flavored paraphernalia. And we said, okay, Oscar Mayer, you have a huge opportunity to just take some of this market share. And so everything that we did was not designed to look at the competitive set or even to look at its own goals. It was just to move share and conversation in the category. And the kickoff of that was the Great American Bacon Barter, where a man went across the country with no cash, no credit card, just a refrigerated truck full of bacon, and he bartered for everything that he bumped into along the way. So gas, a place to stay, tickets to the Jets game, 6 bricks, by the way. And that was Tebow's opening. So this guy goes all the way across the country, all fueled by social media. So does that mean that it's an experiential campaign? Does that mean that it's a PR campaign? Is it a social media campaign? Because he's in a truck that's very offline. But in the end, what do we measure it against? We actually measured it against both taking a larger share of the bacon conversation, which we did, and movement on sentiment, because those were the two things that mattered in the grand scheme of things. So making sure that the measurement is aligned with why you did the campaign and the insight is pretty critical towards helping move things forward. So the more you guys can be asking questions of why are you doing this, the better off we're going to be in developing that. But it's as much about the upfront as it is on the measurement. So you guys are the research community. You're helping fuel all the great work that we're able to put out into the market, as well as the measurement therein, depending on your role. So that's so critical for all of our success.
So metrics like this, how do they connect to the business objective in other businesses, like the sentiment, share of sentiment, for example? Would that fly with you guys?
Again, it depends on the business. So we were also in the Super Bowl with a tweet right on the moment for Speed Stick. We have a campaign called Handle It, and it's a nascent attempt to try to get at this young consumer and convert some folks to our brand. And we had tweeted live through the game Handle It moments, and we had a professional football player tweeting those moments. It was all going very well. The lights went out, and we tweeted about handling it. The guy who pulled the plug, how does he handle it? And we got significant kind of. So in that instance, we were trying to engage. We were trying to get entertainment. We were trying to get more pass along and more conversations. So that's move over to oral care. And we track a whole host of different things. So I think in my business, it really does depend on the brand, the nature of the situation, and what we're trying to do. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, as long as it helps the business. Looks like we are running low on time, so I just wanted to thank you for your participation and invite you to help me thank this wonderful panel.
Good. Thank you.